The rain had been falling for hours, drumming against the glass walls of Atlas Dynamics, a high-tech fortress in downtown Atlanta where genius was currency and empathy was a liability. Inside, under the cold buzz of fluorescent light, 20 engineers argued in circles. Equations sprawled across digital whiteboards, symbols tangled like vines, and frustration hung in the air thicker than the smell of burnt coffee. At the center of the chaos stood Arthur Collins, CEO, mid-30s, sharp-jawed, pale-skinned, and dressed in a suit that cost more than some employees' annual rent. His voice was calm, but his eyes were knives. 20 experts, he said quietly, and no one can isolate the variable. No one answered. The room felt smaller. Someone coughed. Another sipped stale espresso and avoided eye contact. Outside the glass, Amara Johnson pushed her mop cart slowly down the hall. She was 32, black slender with hair pulled into a neat bun beneath her blue janitorial cap. The hum of the machines had long become her nightly music. She'd cleaned the same floors for 6 years, polished glass offices, where people barely noticed her reflection, let alone her face. Through the frosted glass, she could hear the tension in their voices, words like error margin computation flow and system instability. The kind of words she'd once dreamed of using when she was still in college before Bill's sickness and reality had forced her to trade textbooks for cleaning supplies. The meeting broke. Engineers streamed out, exhausted and defeated, leaving behind cold pizza boxes and an equation glowing across the wall, a monument to collective failure. When the last elevator door shut, Amara slipped inside. She set down her mop, wiped her hands on her gloves, and stared at the board. "Look at this mess," she muttered. She wasn't talking about the floor. Lines of code blinked across the display. Variables nested within variables, overcomplicating something that should have been simple. She tilted her head. Her mother used to say she had that kind of brain, one that saw patterns the way musicians heard rhythm. She picked up a dry cloth and began erasing the corner of the board. Then she stopped. Something didn't add up. She squinted, leaned closer. They flipped the constant sign twice. She whispered. "That'll do it." Her hand moved almost by instinct. She grabbed a stylus, corrected one formula, then another, a diagonal shift, here, a substitution there, numbers aligned like dominoes falling into place. Within a minute, the chaos became harmony. She exhaled, half smiling. "Now that's clean." A voice behind her cut through the quiet. "Who did this?" Amara froze. The reflection in the glass showed Arthur Collins, standing at the door, tall, immaculate, the kind of man who always seemed to own the space he occupied. I was just cleaning," she stammered. He stepped inside slowly, eyes fixed on the board. "Cleaning doesn't involve rewriting complex algorithms. I noticed something off," she said, gripping the mop handle like a shield. "Just thought I'd fix it." Arthur's gaze traveled from the neat rows of numbers to the woman standing in front of them. "Do you know what this equation represents?" She hesitated. "Optimization protocol for neural sequencing, if I'm reading it right." His eyebrows lifted. "You read it right." He looked again at the board, disbelief softening into intrigue. "None of my engineers caught that." Amara shrugged. Maybe they were too close to see it. Sometimes you've got to step back to notice what's wrong. Same with stains on glass. Arthur almost smiled. "What's your name, Amara?" "Amara Johnson. And what department are you in?" She glanced down at her uniform. "Maintenance." Silence stretched between them. Rain pounded harder against the windows. Finally, he said, "You just solved a problem that cost us 3 days and 20 specialists." Amara's lips curved slightly. "Guess you've been hiring the wrong kind of specialist." Arthur blinked, unused to anyone talking to him that way. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "I want you in that same room at 10 o'clock. She frowned. "With the engineers?" "Yes. I don't think they let cleaning staff sit in meetings." "They will," he replied. "I'm the one who calls the meetings." Amara hesitated, unsure if this was a reward or a trap. "All right," she said finally. "But if anyone asks why I'm there, tell them," Arthur interrupted, "that you fixed their equation." He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "One more thing," he said without looking back. "Next time you decide to rewrite an algorithm, don't erase the proof. I'd like to see how you think." When he was gone, Amara looked around the empty room. Her reflection stared back from the glossy floor, a woman who had just broken an invisible rule. She whispered to herself, "You did it again, Amara." Solved the problem. Started another. The rain eased outside, but inside something new was beginning a shift. Neither of them yet understood, drawn along a line no formula could define. The next morning, sunlight poured through the glass facade of Atlas Dynamics, cutting clean lines across the marble floors. Amara had never seen the building look so alive. Employees buzzed like currents, their ID badges flashing against tailored suits. And there she was, a woman in a blue uniform clutching a mop handle in one hand and her courage in the other. The receptionist looked up when she stepped into the executive lobby. They blinked, confused. "Deliveries go to the service entrance," one of them said politely but firmly. "I'm not here for deliveries," Amara replied. "Mr. Collins asked me to join the morning meeting." A pause. Two women exchanged glances, the kind of look people give when they think you've made a mistake but are too polite to say it aloud. "You mean Arthur Collins, the CEO?" Amara nodded. "That's the one." A young assistant was called, whispering into a headset. Within seconds, the glass doors slid open, and Arthur himself appeared in a dark charcoal suit expression, unreadable. "She's with me," he said simply. The room fell silent as every pair of eyes followed them down the corridor. Inside the boardroom, the same engineers from the night before sat waiting, their screens glowing with graphs and equations. The air was thick with caffeine and skepticism. When Amara entered, the murmurs began. "Is she the new intern? Maybe HR's doing that diversity thing again. Maintenance crew's getting bold these days." Arthur took his seat at the head of the table, folding his hands. "Before we begin," he said, his tone sharp enough to slice the whispers in half, "you all remember the equation we couldn't solve last night?" A few nods. One engineer sighed audibly. "Well," Arthur continued, "it was solved." He gestured toward Amara. "By her." The reaction was immediate. Confusion. A nervous laugh from the corner. One man muttered, "You're joking." Arthur leaned back. "Does it look like I'm joking?" Amara could feel her heart pounding. The room seemed smaller now, every breath measured. She cleared her throat. "It wasn't that hard, really. You all were flipping the constant twice." The lead engineer, a tall, pale man with horn-rimmed glasses, frowned. "Excuse me, Miss Johnson. Amara Johnson." He tilted his head, his smile patronizing. "Miss Johnson, with all due respect, this is an advanced neural optimization model. It's not something you just stumble across while mopping floors," she finished for him. The room froze. Arthur's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, the faintest trace of approval. "Go on," he said. Amara pointed at the projection. "You're treating the error vector as a static value when it should be dynamic. So your system's chasing its own tail. I just rerouted the feedback loop." Another engineer leaned forward. "That's not possible, we tested." Arthur interrupted. "You didn't test it her way." He tapped his tablet, pulling up the simulation Amara had rewritten. The numbers flowed perfectly, the red error line turning green. A hush swept the room. "Looks pretty possible to me," Arthur said quietly. The lead engineer's jaw tightened. "That's surprising." Amara crossed her arms. "No, it's math." Someone in the back stifled a laugh. Someone else coughed to cover it. Arthur stood. "Miss Johnson's insight saved us at least 2 weeks of work. So effective immediately she'll join our research sessions as an observation assistant." A wave of disbelief rippled around the table. Amara blinked. Observation assistant Arthur met her eyes. "Yes, think of it as cross-departmental collaboration," one of the engineers muttered under his breath. "More like charity." Amara heard it. Everyone did. She turned, voice steady but sharp. "If it's charity, it's the kind that cleaned up your mistakes." The room went silent again. Arthur's lips twitched the ghost of a smile. "Meeting adjourned," he said, grabbing his tablet. As the others filed out, Amara lingered by the window, watching the city glitter below. Her reflection stared back, a woman who had just crossed an invisible line between what she was and what they thought she could be. Arthur approached. You handled that well. She didn't turn. They think this is a joke. They won't for long. Because I'm good at math. Because you're right, he said simply. And in this place, being right is the only thing that changes minds. Amara finally faced him. You think so? I want to. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The powerful man and the woman no one saw until she proved she couldn't be ignored. Then Amara smiled faintly. Guess we'll both find out. She picked up her cart, leaving faint, wet tracks across the pristine floor. Each mark would vanish in seconds, but the impression she left behind that wouldn't fade so easily. By the third day, Amara's name had already become a rumor. Whispers echoed in the hallways of Atlas Dynamics, the janitor who solved the impossible equation, the black woman who outsmarted the AI team. Some spoke with curiosity, others with irritation, and a few with that careful tone of disbelief people use when the truth makes them uncomfortable. In the company cafeteria, engineers debated between sips of coffee. It had to be luck, one said. She must have read something online. No man Collins himself confirmed it. By noon, even the cleaning crew had heard. When Amara walked in to clock her shift, the younger janitor smiled at her with pride. You made them notice us, one whispered. Amara smiled, but only halfway. For now, she said, let's see how long it lasts. That evening, she was transferred temporarily to the research floor. Her new badge didn't open the executive suites, only the labs. But even that felt surreal. She'd once wiped these screens clean. Now she was expected to use them. Her desk sat at the far end of a long, sterile room filled with servers humming like restless thoughts. Every time she moved, she could feel eyes on her cautious measuring waiting for her to fail. Arthur appeared late that afternoon, striding through the glass doors with his usual air of quiet control. How's the adjustment? Strange, Amara admitted. Feels like I'm trespassing somewhere. He studied her. You're not trespassing. You're contributing. Some people don't see the difference. Arthur sighed. You'll have to give them time. Amara looked at him, one eyebrow raised. You really think time fixes bias? He didn't answer right away. I think results do. She wanted to believe him, but the line between idealism and privilege was always invisible, and she'd spent her whole life tripping over it. That night, she returned to her small apartment in West End, a modest place with peeling paint and a view of the MARTA tracks. Her mother, Lydia Johnson, sat by the window folding hospital scrubs, the TV murmuring in the background. You're home late, Lydia said without looking up. New schedule. The CEO wants me helping with some tech project. Her mother paused. Helping or fixing what his people broke? Amara smiled. A little of both. Lydia studied her daughter, the same girl who'd once been top of her engineering class before the tuition bill came due and the scholarships fell through. I'm proud of you, baby, but be careful. Careful of what them. Lydia's voice softened, but her eyes didn't. I've seen how the world looks at women like us, smart but out of place. They'll let you shine just enough to call it progress. Then they'll remind you it's still their house. Amara leaned against the counter, watching the city lights flicker through the blinds. Maybe it's time someone redecorated the house. Her mother chuckled quietly. That's my girl. The next morning, Amara returned to Atlas early. The air smelled of ozone and ambition. As she passed a group of engineers, their conversation stopped mid-sentence. One of them forced a polite smile. Morning. Morning, she replied evenly. When she reached her desk, she found a small note stuck to her monitor. In neat handwriting, it read, Don't let them tell you where you belong. A.C. Arthur Collins. Amara read it twice, unsure if the gesture was empathy or guilt. Maybe both. Either way, it meant someone up there was watching her for more than just performance metrics. By the end of the week, her contribution to the new system model had become impossible to ignore. The prototype finally stabilized. Reports circulated with her name attached, not buried in footnotes, but printed beside the lead engineers. And yet the silence in the break room said more than any document could. When she walked in for coffee, conversation paused. A few smiled too quickly. Others stared at their screens. One woman whispered, She doesn't even have a degree. Amara poured her coffee slowly. You're right, she said without looking up. All I have is the solution you couldn't find." The whisper stopped. Later that afternoon, she caught sight of herself in the polished chrome of the elevator door, the reflection of a woman crossing an invisible line every second she breathed. Not fully accepted, above no longer belonging below. She pressed the button for the 12th floor and whispered under her breath, "Let's see how far this line goes." The door slid shut, sealing her inside halfway between the world that ignored her and the one that wasn't ready for her yet. Arthur Collins hadn't slept. The city outside his penthouse window was a field of lights ordered flawless and utterly silent, like a machine pretending to be alive. He stood there in his shirt sleeves tie, discarded the reflection of his own face hovering over the skyline. He used to like that reflection, the self-made man, the genius who built Atlas Dynamics from nothing but code and control. But lately all he saw was a man who'd built walls so high he couldn't see beyond them. On his desk lay the company report, a neat stack of data confirming what he already knew: productivity up performance, steady innovation plateaued. All numbers, no pulse. And then there was her, Amara Johnson, the janitor who'd walked into his perfect world and made it stutter. The woman whose insight had fixed what 20 of his best couldn't. Arthur had always believed talent could be measured degrees IQ performance reviews. But Amara didn't fit any metric he knew. She had no credentials, no network, no pedigree. Just brilliance, raw, unpolished, and inconvenient. He'd replayed their conversation in his head more times than he cared to admit. The way she said, maybe they were too close to see it. The way her words cut through the arrogance that hung in every meeting room he'd ever walked into. He told himself his interest was professional, but that wasn't entirely true. Something about her had unsettled him, not in a romantic way, not yet, but in the way a mirror unsettles someone who's been avoiding his own reflection. At 8 a.m., Arthur arrived at the office early. He poured himself black coffee and stood by the glass wall of the boardroom, watching the city wake up. A reflection in motion caught his eye, Amara crossing the lobby below her cleaning cart, replaced by a small tablet and a security badge that looked slightly too big on her uniform. He found himself smiling, then caught the smile and forced it away. When she entered the research lab later that morning, he was already there. "You're early," she said. "So are you. I like quiet rooms. They don't judge." Arthur glanced up. "Do rooms usually judge only when they're full of people?" For the first time in a while, he laughed a short, genuine sound that startled even him. "You've got a sharp tongue, Miss Johnson." "Sharp eyes, sharper tongue," she replied. "Occupational hazard." They spent the next hour reviewing data. She pointed out errors his engineers had missed, her fingers moving across the digital board with calm confidence. He listened, really listened in a way he rarely did. At one point she said softly, "You know, when I was a kid, my teacher told me I had good instincts for patterns. Then she asked if my mom could afford math camp. When I said no, she just smiled and said, 'That's a shame. Like, potential only matters if you can pay for it.'" Arthur didn't know what to say. He'd never been told no in that way. "I'm sorry that happened," he said finally. Amara shrugged. "Don't be. I learned something. Some people start with a map. Others have to draw their own." Her words stayed with him long after the meeting ended. Later that night, Arthur called a friend from Harvard, the head of recruitment for a leading research foundation. "Do you believe someone without a degree can outperform trained engineers?" Arthur asked. His friend chuckled. "You mean street genius?" "Sure, in stories. I mean in life." A pause. "Depends. Are you asking about a person or about your own system?" Arthur hung up without answering. That question kept him awake. Was it her brilliance that surprised him, or the fact that it had revealed his own blindness? He stared again at the skyline, the perfect grid of light and logic he'd once admired. Now all he could see were invisible lines dividing who got seen and who didn't. Somewhere across town, Amara was probably asleep after another long day, but in his mind her voice echoed like a quiet equation he couldn't solve. Maybe they were too close to see it. He wasn't sure if she meant the engineers, or him. The cafeteria at Atlas Dynamics was a gleaming modern space, all glass walls and steel tables where caffeine-fueled innovation and hierarchy dictated who sat where. Executives clustered near the windows, engineers filled the middle rows, and the maintenance staff, when they came, at all stayed close to the vending machines near the back. That morning, Amara sat alone by the far corner with her paper cup of black coffee scrolling through her tablet. The numbers on the screen made perfect sense. The people didn't. Across the room, a table of engineers talked loudly enough for their words to carry. "She's just here for optics," one muttered. "Collins probably thinks it looks progressive." Another smirked. "Yeah, next he'll make her CTO. That'd be rich." The group chuckled, and one of them, a young man with slick hair and too much confidence, added, "She's pretty. I'll give her that. Maybe that's the real reason she's still around." Amara closed her tablet. The coffee had gone cold. She stood, walked to their table, and set her cup down. "You're right," she said evenly. "It is rich coming from people who couldn't fix a sign error." The laughter died. Silence spread like spilled ink. She didn't raise her voice, didn't curse or tremble. She simply met each of their eyes in turn, calm and steady. "If it makes you feel any better, I don't need to be CTO. I already did the job once." Then she picked up her cup and walked away, leaving the table speechless. Arthur Collins had witnessed the scene from the coffee counter. He hadn't intended to, he was only there because he'd forgotten his espresso upstairs. But watching her handle that moment without flinching sent a ripple through him. Admiration, guilt, maybe both. He followed her to the outdoor terrace. "You handled that with restraint," he said quietly. Amara leaned on the railing, looking out over the city. "Restraint's what you learn when yelling doesn't work." Arthur studied her face, calm, sharp, unreadable. "You shouldn't have to deal with that here." "Oh, I deal with it everywhere," she said. "Here's just the fancier version." He frowned. "You shouldn't normalize it." "Then don't," she replied finally, turning to face him. "You're the one who decides what gets normalized in this building." Her words landed like truth often does, simple, direct, and impossible to ignore. Arthur cleared his throat. "Let me make it right. Have lunch with me." She laughed softly. "Lunch with the CEO." "That'll definitely fix the optics." He smiled despite himself. "Not optics. Perspective." After a pause, she nodded. "Fine, but only if I can pay for my own coffee." They ended up in a quiet corner of a small cafe across the street, a place too ordinary for executives, but too expensive for janitors, the kind of in-between that suited them both. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Then Arthur said, "You know, I reviewed your formula again last night. The logic isn't just correct, it's elegant. Where did you learn to think like that?" Amara stirred her coffee slowly. "Community college, online courses, life. Life? Yeah. You learn a lot about systems when you're stuck outside them." Arthur tilted his head. "I've always believed merit speaks for itself." Amara gave him a look, not angry, just tired. "That's because merit always spoke your language. For people like me, you have to scream it. Write it twice and still get told it's luck." He exhaled slowly. "You're right." "That's a start," she said with a small grin. They talked for nearly an hour about algorithms, inequality, Atlanta's changing skyline, and the way people mistake confidence for competence. At one point, Arthur found himself laughing genuinely, forgetting the scripts that usually ran his conversations. When the check came, Amara reached for it first. "Told you I'd pay for my own coffee." Arthur didn't argue. He simply nodded. "Then I owe you the next one." "Careful, Mr. Collins. Keep saying that and people might think we're friends." He smiled. "Maybe we are." Her eyes softened, but only for a moment. "Let's not rush it. Equations need balance before they make sense." She stood, grabbed her coat, and left him sitting there, a CEO surrounded by numbers and data, realizing for the first time that balance was something he'd never learned to calculate. That night, back in his office, Arthur rewrote a line in the company's research charter: "Talent may be discovered in unexpected places. Our duty is to recognize it wherever it exists." He didn't tell anyone who inspired it. He didn't have to. By the end of the week, Amara's life had changed, not in the glittering, cinematic way success stories usually unfold, but in quiet, uneasy ripples. She now attended morning briefings instead of cleaning after them. Her name appeared on research memos, her badge granted access to restricted labs, and her voice, though still soft, carried enough gravity to make rooms pause. Yet every step upward felt heavier. Walking through Atlas Dynamics was like walking through invisible weather. Some smiles were warm. Most were polite, that delicate politeness people used when they weren't sure whether to fear you, admire you, or resent you. In the elevator, conversation stopped when she entered. In the cafeteria, tables went quiet mid-laughter. The silence wasn't loud, but it was constant, a hum of discomfort beneath the company's polished harmony. One evening she found Arthur standing alone in the glass corridor overlooking the city. He looked different, looser. The top button of his shirt, undone sleeves, rolled up a rare fracture in his perfection. "You look like a man calculating regret," Amara said lightly. He smiled faintly. "You make it sound like math. Everything's math if you zoom out far enough." He turned to face her. "What about this? She tilted her head. "You mean your sudden habit of finding reasons to talk to me?" He chuckled under his breath. "Maybe I just appreciate good conversation." Or maybe, she said softly, "You're realizing that intelligence doesn't always come with the right skin color." Arthur's smile faded. "Is that what you think I believed?" She met his gaze. "I think you never had to think about it." The air between them shifted, not angry, just honest, the kind of honesty that left no room for comfort. "I'm trying," he said after a moment. "I know," she replied. "That's why I'm still here." They stood side by side in silence, watching headlights weave through Atlanta's streets below 1,000 small stories crossing paths, each unaware of the others. Amara finally spoke again. "You know, when I first came here, I just wanted the paycheck. My mom's been working double shifts at the hospital. My sister's trying to get through nursing school. I didn't plan on changing anyone's perception of race or class. I just wanted to pay rent." Arthur listened quietly. "But the thing is," she continued, "the moment I solved that equation, I stopped being invisible. And that's when it got harder. When people don't see you, they can ignore you. When they finally do, they start deciding what version of you they're comfortable with." Arthur's jaw tightened. "I won't let anyone diminish what you've done." "You can't protect me from perception," she said gently. "It's built into the walls here, into the air." He looked down at his reflection in the window, the pale contrast of his face beside hers. "Then help me see what I can't." She smiled, but her eyes were tired. "That's a start." They talked for another hour, not about algorithms or data this time, but about childhoods. Arthur told her about Connecticut winters, about his father, who measured love and expectations about the pressure to be perfect. Amara told him about summers in Georgia, the church choir her mother still sang in the nights she studied by candlelight when the power was cut off. 2 worlds, 1 conversation. When they left the building, it was almost midnight. Arthur offered to walk her to her car. They stepped into the damp night air, the city lights washing their faces in alternating gold and blue. As they reached her old sedan, she turned to him. "You know, you don't have to keep proving you're a good guy." He looked startled. "I'm not. I know," she said. "That's the point. You're not used to being questioned, but that's what growth feels like." He nodded, slowly absorbing it. "You're right again. See," she teased. "Maybe we'll make a mathematician out of you after all." He laughed quietly, a sound that didn't carry power or pride, this time just warmth. For a moment they stood there, the CEO and the cleaning lady, no titles, no walls. "Good night, Arthur," she said. "Good night, Amara." When she drove off, he stayed on the curb a long time, watching the taillights fade. The rain began again, soft and rhythmic, like the world itself was thinking. Inside his chest something shifted. Not love, not yet. Just the weight of color and the realization that he'd been blind to it all his life. It began with a headline: "Black Cleaning Lady Outsmarts Atlas Engineers." By the time Amara saw it, it had already been shared thousands of times. Her phone buzzed, nonstop notifications, comments, messages from people she'd never met. Some called her a genius. Others called her a fraud. Some praised her story as inspirational. Many didn't bother to hide their venom. This is what happens when companies chase diversity points instead of competence. She's not qualified, just lucky. Affirmative action in action. By mid-morning, her face was everywhere, the photo from her employee badge cropped and captioned. On one site, they'd even added the words from mop to math. She sat at her desk, staring at the screen, feeling her stomach twist. It wasn't pride she felt. It was exposure, the sense of being seen not as herself, but as a symbol people could twist whichever way they liked. A soft knock broke the silence. Arthur stepped in, tablet in hand, face drawn tight. "You've seen it?" he asked. "Hard to miss." He placed the tablet on her desk, showing the article. "We're investigating who leaked the story." "Don't bother," she said quietly. "The damage is done." Arthur frowned. "No, we can control this. I'll have PR issue a statement." "A statement." She looked up sharply. "Saying what?" "That your janitor got too smart?" His mouth opened, then closed again. "That's not what I meant." "I know," she said, her voice softer now, "but that's what people will hear." Arthur hesitated. "Let me handle it." "I've been handling this all my life," she replied, "just not with this many cameras." The door opened suddenly. Rachel, one of the senior engineers, rushed in, holding her phone. "Arthur, it's trending on Twitter. They're calling it the janitor genius scandal. The board wants a response." Arthur's jaw tightened. "Get PR on a call. Now." Rachel glanced at Amara, then back to Arthur. Maybe she should stay out of the public eye for a while. Until this blows over. Amara stood. "You mean hide?" Rachel winced. "That's not what I—" "Yeah," Amara said, cutting her off. "It is." She grabbed her coat and walked out, ignoring the stares that followed her through the glass corridor. By the time she reached the lobby, she could feel her pulse in her throat. The receptionist, the guards, the interns, everyone seemed to be watching her. Or maybe she just imagined it. But imagination or not, it hurt. Outside, the air was heavy and gray. She walked 3 blocks before realizing she had nowhere to go. So she ducked into a quiet diner, the kind of place that smelled like bacon grease and refuge. She sat by the window, scrolling through comment sections she knew she shouldn't read. She probably had help. They're only protecting her because she's black. This is what happens when cleaning ladies think they're scientists. Each line felt like a slap, not because they were new, but because they were familiar. She'd heard versions of them her whole life, just never written in such sharp fonts. Her phone buzzed again, a text from her mother. "You okay, baby?" Amara stared at the words. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to protect her mother from this ugliness. Instead, she typed back, "I will be." When she returned to Atlas the next day, the atmosphere had changed. Conversations stopped when she passed. Emails ended mid-sentence when she entered a room. Arthur met her by the elevators. "The board wants to suspend media access until the situation cools down. I tried to—" She raised her hand. "You don't have to protect me. I'm not protecting you. I'm protecting your work. My work doesn't need protection," she said. "It needs respect." Arthur's eyes softened. "You have mine." "I know," she said. "But that's not enough, Arthur. Not when the system itself decides who gets to be brilliant and who gets called a miracle." The elevator doors opened, but neither of them moved. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the machinery and the faint, distant rain. Finally, Amara stepped in. "You can't fix this with PR," she said quietly. "It's not a scandal. It's a mirror." The doors slid shut between them. Arthur stood there long after she was gone, her words echoing in his head, and for the first time, he began to realize that this wasn't just her battle. It was his reflection, too. By Friday morning, the story had turned into a spectacle. Television anchors debated whether Atlas Dynamics had lowered its standards. Bloggers wrote think pieces with titles like "The Myth of the Diversity Genius." The morning show hosts smiled while saying her name, but their laughter between segments told another story. Inside the building, Amara could feel the weight of every headline pressing down on her shoulders. She tried to focus on work, but the murmurs never stopped, half pity, half mockery, all poison. She passed 2 junior developers in the hallway whispering. "Did you see the comment thread?" "Yeah, she's everywhere. Crazy how people play the race card." She turned, voice steady but firm. "What card is that?" "The one where you get death threats with your morning coffee." They froze, stammered an apology, and slipped away. She didn't even watch them go. In the lab, the silence was worse. Arthur stood at the far end of the room talking with the PR director. When he saw her, he dismissed the conversation immediately. But he said, his tone softer than usual, "Can we talk in private?" She folded her arms. "Is this about the damage control plan again?" "About you," he said. "About how we move forward." She followed him into the empty conference room, the same one where everything had started. The whiteboard still bore the faint traces of her first correction, long erased but never forgotten. Arthur closed the door. "The board thinks it's best if you take a leave of absence until the media calms down." She stared at him. "A leave? Because I embarrassed them by being right." "It's not about that," he said, his voice tightening. "They're afraid this attention could hurt investor confidence. You're being targeted, Amara. I don't want you in the crossfire." "You think I haven't been in the crossfire my whole life?" she shot back. "You think this is new?" Arthur exhaled, looking tired human for once. "You're not listening." "No, you're not," she said. "You're asking me to disappear so the people who doubted me don't have to face what that says about them." He looked at her words caught behind restraint. "I'm trying to protect you." She laughed, short and bitter. "You can't protect me, Arthur. You can't protect me from the way they look at me or the jokes they whisper when I leave a room or the part of them that hates that a black woman fixed what they couldn't. You can't protect me from that because you're part of it whether you mean to be or not." He flinched. It wasn't cruelty, it was truth. Amara took a step closer, her voice low but unwavering. "If I were a white man with an Ivy League degree, this would be a triumph. But because I'm me, it's a scandal. That's the equation nobody wants to solve." The silence that followed was raw, the kind that makes even the walls seem to listen. Finally, Arthur said quietly, "You're right." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "Then say it to them, not to me." He nodded, but she could already see hesitation flicker behind his calm expression, the hesitation of a man who'd never had to risk his comfort to do what was right. She shook her head slowly. "I thought maybe you were different." "Amara." "No," she interrupted, voice breaking. "I thought maybe you saw me, not as a symbol, not as your experiment in empathy, but as a person." He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Amara stepped back, tears finally falling, not from sadness, but from exhaustion. "I'm done explaining my worth to people who already decided I don't belong." She pulled her badge from her lanyard and set it on the table, the same badge she'd once been proud to wear. "Consider this my leave of absence," she said. "Please," Arthur said, reaching for her. "Don't walk away angry." She turned toward the door, pausing only once. "I'm not angry," she said. "I'm just done trying to clean a place that doesn't want to stay clean." The door shut softly behind her. Arthur stood in the empty room staring at the badge she left behind. On the glass walls her reflection lingered, faint, fragile, but impossible to erase. For the first time, Arthur realized what true silence sounded like. Not peace, absence. And for the first time, he didn't know how to fix it. Atlas Dynamics had never been this quiet. For years, the building hummed with the steady rhythm of innovation printers, whirring doors hissing open, engineers debating algorithms like poets arguing about rhyme. But now silence hung over the hallways, like a fog no one dared to breathe through. It wasn't just the absence of one woman. It was the absence of what she had brought, a strange, grounding energy that turned tension into thought, pride into progress. Arthur noticed it first in the little things. Meetings ran longer. Ideas felt flatter. Conversations turned mechanical, stripped of the spark that once made the company feel alive. The team was performing, yes, but without pulse. At the end of each day, he found himself pausing by the lab's glass door, expecting to hear her laugh echo faintly across the servers. But all he heard was the whisper of air conditioning and the soft static of machines running calculations that suddenly seemed meaningless. He had approved the official statement, Atlas Dynamics remains committed to fostering innovation through diverse perspectives. It was polished, safe, and utterly hollow. He hated every word of it. The night after Amara's resignation, Arthur stayed in his office long past midnight. The skyline of Atlanta stretched beneath him, sterile and brilliant, like the mind of a man who had everything except what mattered. On his desk lay her old badge, its laminated surface reflecting the city lights. He turned it over again and again in his hands, tracing her name as though it could answer the question that haunted him. When did I start believing equality was an equation that could be solved on paper? He opened his laptop and stared at a blank document for nearly an hour. Then he began to type. Not a report, not a memo, but something raw and unfamiliar. To the board of directors, we built this company on intelligence, innovation, and integrity. But we've confused intelligence with pedigree innovation, with safety, and integrity with silence. What happened with Amara Johnson isn't a PR crisis. It's a reflection. We failed to see genius because it didn't arrive in a suit or speak with an accent we were trained to respect. We failed her, and by extension, the very idea of what Atlas claims to stand for. Effective immediately, I am suspending the current review policy for research recruitment. We will rewrite it from the ground up to ensure that no one is ever disqualified by circumstance instead of capability. And yes, I know this will upset people. Let it. Arthur Collins, CEO, Atlas Dynamics. He didn't send it. Not yet. Maybe because he still wasn't sure if it was courage or guilt pushing him forward. The next morning he walked through the building with a strange clarity. Every hallway, every polished surface, every glass panel reflected something he could no longer ignore. His own reflection layered over 1,000 quiet inequalities he had once called efficiency. At the water cooler, a fern sat drooping its leaves, browning at the edges. Amara used to water it, talking to it, like it could understand. Arthur poured a cup of water from the dispenser and tilted it carefully over the soil. "You're not the only one she kept alive," he muttered. The intern nearby blinked in surprise. Sir," Arthur smiled faintly. "Never mind." That evening, as the sun bled orange across the city, he found himself at the far end of the 12th floor, in front of the same glass door where she used to enter every morning with her cart and her soft hum of a gospel song. He stood there for a long time, not as a CEO, but as a man finally realizing that silence, too, can be prejudice when it hides behind professionalism. Without Amara, Atlas ran smoother, quieter, and emptier. He had built a machine that worked perfectly, but now he missed the heartbeat that had made it human. The GPS led Arthur far from the polished steel skyline of downtown, past the billboards, the manicured suburbs, and into the south side where the streets narrowed and the air smelled of rain and earth. He wasn't sure what he expected to find there. Maybe closure. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe just the truth that corporate language could never name. The houses were small, close together, painted in colors faded by sun and years. Kids rode bikes between puddles. An old man in a rocking chair nodded at him as he passed. It was a neighborhood that lived without pretense, the kind of place where people's hands showed what their work was. When he stopped in front of a small green gate with chipped paint, the world felt suddenly still. The mailbox read Johnson in hand-painted letters. He stepped out of his car, smoothing his suit as if that could hide how out of place he was. Before he could knock, the front door opened. A woman in her late 50s stood there, gray hair pulled back in a bun, apron dusted with flour. Her eyes were sharp, the same kind of sharp that came from years of watching the world underestimate her and her children. "Can I help you?" she asked. Arthur cleared his throat. "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Arthur Collins. I work with your daughter, Amara." Her expression didn't soften, but her voice did. "So you're the one from the news?" He nodded awkwardly. "Yes, ma'am. I wanted to talk to her if she's home." "She's in the back," the woman said, then paused. "But before you go disturbing her peace, come in. You look like you haven't had a proper meal in weeks." Arthur blinked. "Oh, that's not necessary. I just sit," she said firmly, motioning toward a small couch covered with crocheted blankets. "Around here, we don't let guests stand awkwardly at the door." He obeyed. The living room was simple photographs, church ribbons, a faint smell of cinnamon and soap. Everything here felt real in a way his high-rise office never did. "I'm Lydia Johnson," she said, setting down 2 mugs of sweet tea. "Amara's mother. You'll have to excuse the mess. She's been replanting the backyard." "It's no mess at all," Arthur said softly. "It's home." Lydia studied him for a long moment. "You didn't come all the way here just to say hello." "No," he admitted. "I came because I needed to understand something." "I thought if I could talk to her," Lydia interrupted gently. You don't understand people like my daughter by talking, Mr. Collins. You understand them by listening. Arthur lowered his gaze. I haven't been very good at that. At least you know it, Lydia said. That's something. A door creaked at the back of the house. Footsteps approached. Amara appeared in the doorway, hair tied in a loose scarf, wearing jeans and a faded university t-shirt. She froze when she saw him. What are you doing here? Arthur stood unsure whether to smile or apologize. I wanted to talk to you. Her voice was calm but cold. About what damage control optics? No, he said quickly. About us. About what happened. Lydia took her cue, wiping her hands on her apron. I'll give you two some privacy, she said, and disappeared into the kitchen. The room felt smaller the moment she left. Amara crossed her arms. You shouldn't have come here, Arthur. This is my mother's home, not your boardroom. I know, he said quietly. But I had to. The company's not the same without you. She gave a dry laugh. You'll survive. Companies always do. People like me were replaceable, not you. She looked at him weary, but still burning. You said that before. Remember, right before you asked me to take a leave. Arthur swallowed hard. I made a mistake. I thought I was protecting you. No, she said softly. You were protecting yourself, your comfort, your image, your clean conscience. He didn't argue. For the first time, he didn't know how. After a moment, Amara sighed. You think you can just walk into my neighborhood, drink my mama's sweet tea, and make it all better? I don't expect forgiveness, Arthur said. I just wanted to tell you that I see it now, all of it. What you face every day. What I never had to think about. She studied him closely, searching for sincerity, and for once found no hint of performance in his eyes. Why now? She asked quietly. Because the silence after you left was louder than anything I've ever heard. For a long moment, neither spoke. The sounds of life filtered in from outside, children laughing a radio, playing distant gospel, the clatter of Lydia washing dishes. Finally, Amara said, You can't undo how the world sees me, Arthur. No, he said, but I can change how my world does. That was the first thing he'd said that she believed. She sighed, the anger in her shoulders softening into exhaustion. You really don't know when to quit, do you? I'm learning. Her lips curved slightly. Then you might just make it. Lydia peeked through the doorway, then drying her hands. Well, she said with a knowing smile, if you're staying for dinner, I'll set another plate. Arthur hesitated. I wouldn't want to impose. Amara interrupted. Sit down, Mr. Collins. You've already trespassed this far. Might as well stay for cornbread. He smiled for the first time in days. Yes, ma'am. And for that evening, just one quiet, imperfect evening, the world outside of that little green gate stopped spinning so cruelly. Arthur would later realize that Lydia's words were the truest lesson he'd ever learned. You don't understand people like my daughter by talking. You understand them by listening. 3 weeks later, the buzz inside Atlas Dynamics shifted again. Not loud, not chaotic, just a subtle current of anticipation no one could explain. The rumor mill, always hungry, whispered, She's coming back. Arthur didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it either. But that morning, he stood at the glass doors of the 12th floor, watching as Amara Johnson walked through the lobby, not with a mop this time, not with a cart or cleaning gloves, but with a quiet, unmistakable authority. Her hair was braided, her stride deliberate, her expression calm. She wore a simple black blazer over her blue uniform shirt, a choice that wasn't accidental. It said, I remember where I started, but I'm not staying there. When she reached him, Arthur smiled. Welcome back. Let's not call it that, she said. Let's call it a continuation. He nodded. That seems more accurate. The conference room was already full, the entire research department plus managers from every floor, the kind of crowd that only gathered when something monumental or catastrophic was about to happen. Amara took her place at the front of the room. No slides, no notes, just her voice. I was asked to speak today, she began, about what happened, about how a story got out of control, how a company and a woman both became headlines they didn't ask for. The room was silent. She looked around slowly. But I'm not here to talk about the scandal. I'm here to talk about silence, the kind that fills rooms when prejudice walks in, the kind that pretends neutrality while it chooses sides. A A few people shifted uncomfortably. Others stared down at their tablets. When the article came out, she continued, "People told me to stay quiet, to wait until things calmed down, to be grateful I had a seat at the table. But here's what I learned. Silence is not gratitude. It's consent. And I've been giving it my whole life." Her words hit the room like a wave, not loud but unstoppable. "I grew up hearing that if I worked twice as hard, I'd be treated the same. But the truth is, you can't outwork a system designed to doubt you. You can only expose it." She paused, letting that sink in. "When I solved that equation, it wasn't just math. It was a moment of visibility, and visibility is dangerous when people are used to you being invisible." In the corner of the room, Rachel, the same engineer who'd once suggested she hide, raised her hand timidly. "Amara, I think we all owe you an apology." Amara smiled faintly. "Don't apologize to me. Just change how you see the next woman who doesn't fit your expectations." Arthur, standing near the back, watched her with quiet awe. There was no anger in her tone, no bitterness, just conviction, the kind that burned steady instead of bright. When she finished, there was a long pause before anyone moved. Then slowly one person began to clap. Another followed. Then the whole room. It wasn't the polite applause of obligation. It was raw, real, the sound of people recognizing something they'd refused to see. Afterward, Arthur found her in the hallway, standing by the same fern she used to water. It looked healthier now, as if her return had somehow revived it too. That was— he searched for the right word. Extraordinary. She smiled. It was honest. "You didn't have to come back, you know." "I did," she said softly, "because walking away felt too much like surrender. And I'm tired of leaving rooms just so someone else can stay comfortable." Arthur nodded slowly. "So, what happens now?" "We work," she said simply. "But this time we make sure everyone gets to be part of the solution." He watched her walk away, greeting colleagues who for once greeted her back, not as a symbol, not as a scandal, but as a peer. Later that evening, Arthur sent an internal memo to every department. "Effective immediately, Atlas Dynamics will launch the Johnson Fellowship, a program dedicated to funding education and career development for underrepresented voices in technology. Innovation doesn't belong to those who can afford it. It belongs to those who dare to think differently." He didn't sign it as CEO, just his name. In his office, he looked out at the city again. The skyline that once mirrored his perfection now seemed softer, almost human. And for the first time, the silence in the hallways didn't feel empty. It felt like breath before the next beginning. The following month, the glass towers of downtown San Francisco shimmered like a promise. Atlas Dynamics had been invited to present its new AI initiative at the International Tech Innovation Summit, a stage reserved for the elite of the industry. The kind of place where words like diversity were printed on banners but rarely lived in practice. Arthur Collins was scheduled as the keynote speaker. His name alone filled the auditorium with expectation. But that morning, standing backstage, he felt none of the control that usually came so easily to him. The polished rhythm of his corporate speeches had deserted him. He kept glancing at the empty chair beside the podium, the one he had insisted be reserved for Amara. Backstage, she adjusted the badge around her neck, trying to ignore the whispers. "Isn't that the cleaning lady? Oh, the one from the scandal they brought her here?" She'd heard it all before. This time it just rolled off. Arthur turned when he saw her. "You made it. I said I would. You don't have to do this," he said. "After everything I do," she replied, "because if I don't, the story stays theirs." He nodded, then offered her a small smile. "Then let's change it." When the announcer's voice echoed through the hall, "Please welcome Arthur Collins, CEO of Atlas Dynamics." The audience erupted in polite applause. Arthur stepped on stage, his suit immaculate, his confidence not quite intact. He began smoothly enough talking about innovation efficiency and breakthroughs, but as the slides advanced, his voice faltered. The graphs blurred on the massive screen. His practiced words felt hollow. He looked up at the sea of faces waiting to be impressed and saw for the first time the problem. It wasn't the technology, it was the absence of humanity behind it. The silence stretched. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Backstage, Amara's eyes narrowed. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, climbed the side stairs, and crossed the stage toward him. Arthur blinked, startled. "Amara, relax," she whispered. "I'm just helping clean up another mess." The audience chuckled softly, unsure whether it was part of the act. She turned to face them, microphone in hand. "You're all here because you believe in innovation. But innovation isn't just about building smarter machines. It's about building a fairer world for the humans who use them." A hush fell over the auditorium. "When I solved a system error in one of our projects," she continued, "it wasn't my degrees or my title that helped me do it because I had neither. It was perspective. It was the ability to see what others couldn't because I wasn't trained to look away." She pointed toward the screen behind them. The slide showed lines of code and beside them a photo of a broom and a mop. "These," she said, "aren't opposites. They're just tools. One cleans data, one cleans floors. Both take skill. The only difference is which one society decided was worth more." The crowd murmured, some uncomfortable, most spellbound. Amara smiled faintly. "Technology is supposed to make life easier. But what good is it if it keeps repeating the same biases that built the world outside this room? If we can teach a machine to learn, maybe we should teach ourselves to unlearn." Arthur watched her, the tension in his chest giving way to something else. Pride, humility, maybe even redemption. He took a step forward, joining her at the mic. "When I founded Atlas Dynamics," he said, "I thought innovation came from intelligence. I was wrong. It comes from perspective, from people like Amara Johnson, who remind us that genius doesn't wear one face, one color, or one uniform." The audience was silent for a long moment. Then someone began to clap. Another followed. Within seconds, the entire hall was on its feet. It wasn't polite applause this time. It was the kind that rises from recognition, that sound human hearts make when truth cuts through polish. When they left the stage, Arthur exhaled deeply. "You stole my show." Amara grinned. "You're welcome." He laughed. "You planned that, didn't you?" "Not really," she said. "I just saw a gap in the system." "Story of my life," he said. "Story of mine too," she replied. Later that evening, as the city lights flickered like distant constellations, Arthur and Amara sat by the hotel balcony sharing coffee instead of champagne. For once, there was no boardroom, no spotlight, just two people who had finally found balance on opposite sides of the same equation. "You ever think about what's next?" Arthur asked. Amara leaned back, watching the stars reflect off the glass. "I don't know. Maybe I'll teach. Maybe I'll build something of my own." He smiled. "Whatever it is, Atlas will back you." She looked at him, the corners of her mouth lifting. "Don't back me, Arthur. Just don't forget me." He nodded slowly. "Never." The sound of distant applause from another event drifted up the street, faint and hollow, but neither of them moved. For the first time, both understood that success wasn't measured in applause. It was in the silence that followed when you knew you'd said something that mattered. And somewhere deep in that silence, the old equation she had once corrected began to make sense again, not on a whiteboard, but between two people who had finally learned that progress doesn't start with perfection. It starts with listening. The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of gray morning when even ambition felt muted. Amara had just finished reviewing a new research prototype when her phone buzzed. The subject line read, "Congratulations, Ms. Johnson, Harvard University AI Graduate Fellowship Award." For a full minute, she didn't move. She reread the words twice, then a third time, as if they might vanish if she blinked too fast. Arthur noticed her expression from across the lab. "What happened?" She turned the screen toward him. He read the first line aloud under his breath. "Full scholarship. Masters in Artificial Intelligence." He looked up, a flicker of disbelief and pride crossing his face. "Amara, this is incredible." "I forgot I even applied," she admitted softly. "It was one of those midnight what-ifs. I didn't think they'd actually—" "They did," he said. "And they should have." Her smile was small but real. "It's just a lot to take in." That night, she sat at her kitchen table, the glow of the laptop casting a soft halo across the room. Her mother was mending a uniform nearby, humming a hymn. When Amara told her the news, Lydia froze, needle midair. "Harvard," she whispered. "The Harvard." Amara laughed. "I think there's only one mama." Lydia pressed a hand to her chest, tears welling. "Baby, you're going to change the world. I'm just trying to catch up to it," Amara said. Her younger sister Renee ran into the room when she heard. "Harvard, as in Boston." "Harvard, you're going to be on TV or something." Amara laughed again, pulling her into a hug. "Not TV, kiddo, just more books." Later, after the excitement faded, she sat by the window, the city stretching out before her. Harvard. A chance to finish what she'd started years ago. A chance to learn, to build, to finally walk into a classroom without wondering if she belonged there. And yet the thought of leaving Atlas made her chest tighten. The next morning she found Arthur already in his office, staring out at the skyline like a man trying to read the future. "Morning," she said softly. He turned, smiling. "You're early? I needed to tell you something before the day got crazy." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Go ahead." "I'm accepting Harvard's offer," she said. "Full-time. The program starts in 6 weeks." Arthur didn't react immediately. His fingers tapped the edge of his desk twice before he nodded. "Of course you are. I don't want to leave the project hanging." "You're not leaving it hanging," he interrupted. "You built its backbone." She hesitated. "You're not upset?" "Upset?" He laughed lightly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "No, just proud. And a little jealous, maybe." She smiled faintly. "You could always apply too." "Harvard would never take me," he said. "They only want people who make history, not spreadsheets." There was a pause. The city below buzzed, oblivious to their small human quiet. "Arthur," she said softly, "you changed too. Don't think I didn't notice." He looked up. "Changed how you stopped trying to prove you're right all the time. You started listening. That's rarer than genius." He smiled at that, a real one, not the polished kind he used for cameras. "Promise me something. Depends on what it is. When you get to Harvard," he said, "don't hold back. Don't make yourself smaller to fit their comfort. If they can't see your brilliance, make them squint." Amara's throat tightened. "I'll try." "No," he said. "You'll do it." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Amara reached across the desk and took his hand just briefly. "Thank you. For everything." Arthur squeezed her hand once before letting go. "Don't thank me. Just come back and make me hire you for twice your salary." She laughed through a tear. "Deal." That night, as she packed her notebooks into a worn leather satchel, her mother stepped into the doorway. "You're thinking about him," Lydia said quietly. Amara didn't deny it. "He's different now," maybe Lydia said. "But remember, difference isn't the same as understanding. Some lessons take longer to learn." Amara nodded, closing the satchel. "Then I hope he keeps learning." Outside, thunder rumbled low over the horizon. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. Amara stood by the window one last time, whispering to herself from the mop to the model. "Let's finish this story right." And somewhere miles away in a high-rise office, Arthur Collins sat in the dark, staring at the same storm rolling across the skyline, wondering how a woman who once swept his floors had managed to rewrite the entire structure of his world. Cambridge in the fall smelled of books, rain, and restless ambition. Every morning Amara walked across the Harvard campus, beneath a canopy of gold leaves, surrounded by students half her age, all rushing somewhere important. At first she felt out of place, older, darker, quieter. But soon she realized that what set her apart was exactly what made her dangerous in the best way possible. In lecture halls, lined with portraits of white men in powdered wigs, she raised her hand without hesitation. When professors cited case studies built on bias, she challenged them with precision and grace. When a student once asked half-jokingly if she had really been a janitor, she answered without shame, "Yes, and I was damn good at it." The room went silent. The professor smiled faintly. "Then I imagine you'll do well here, too." Outside of class, she spent hours in the university's AI ethics lab, poring over datasets and noticing what others didn't, that bias didn't vanish when wrapped in code. It adapted. It hid behind algorithms and objective models. She began collecting data, not the kind stored in servers, but the kind written in people's lives. Stories from students who had been told they didn't belong, workers who had ideas, but no platform voices too soft for institutions built on noise. One night she drafted the outline of a project she called Code of Color, an initiative to teach coding and AI fundamentals to high school students from underrepresented communities. The idea was simple, but radical technology shouldn't reproduce inequality. It should rewrite it. When she emailed Arthur about it, she didn't expect a reply right away. But less than an hour later, her phone rang. "Code of Color," he said as soon as she answered. "That's the name." She laughed. "Good evening to you too, Arthur." "I'm serious," he said. "It's brilliant. How can I help?" "I wasn't asking for help." "Too bad," he replied. "Atlas Dynamics is investing. Quietly. No logos, no PR. Just funding." Why, she asked. "Because you were right," he said simply. "Innovation means nothing if it doesn't open doors for others." Amara smiled into the phone. "You've been practicing that humility thing, huh?" "Don't get used to it," he said, and she could hear the warmth in his voice, the kind that used to scare him. The program launched 6 months later in a rented community center in Atlanta, where Amara returned during her semester break. The walls were freshly painted in bright colors, the tables lined with donated laptops, and 20 nervous teenagers sat waiting as she walked to the front. She began with a story. "I once cleaned offices for people who built artificial intelligence," she said. "I learned that some of the smartest minds in the world could still be blind to their own bias. But you're going to change that." The kids listened wide-eyed as she explained how code could be a language of freedom if written with compassion. Later that day, Arthur arrived quietly, staying in the back of the room. He didn't want to be noticed, but Amara saw him anyway. Their eyes met briefly. She smiled. He nodded. When the class ended, he approached her. "They're brilliant," he said softly. They just needed someone to tell them that, she replied. As the sun dipped low outside, painting the room in amber light, Arthur watched her move between students, answering questions, laughing, guiding her presence, filling every corner of the space. He realized then that Amara hadn't just rewritten equations. She'd rewritten possibility itself. That evening, over dinner with Lydia and Renee, they celebrated quietly. Lydia's kitchen smelled of cornbread and hope. Arthur sat at the small table entirely out of his element, but somehow exactly where he was supposed to be. Lydia poured him sweet tea and said, "You've got good taste, Mr. Collins. Took you a while to notice, but you got there." He smiled. "She noticed me first." "I'm just catching up." Amara laughed, shaking her head. "Don't let him fool you, Mama. He's still learning." They ate, they talked, they planned. And by the end of the night, the idea for something even bigger was born: an expansion of Code of Color, a partnership between Atlas Dynamics and community schools across the country. It wasn't just philanthropy. It was a revolution, a rewriting of who gets to shape the future. As Arthur drove back to his hotel, he looked out the window at the quiet neighborhoods, rolling past the same streets where Amara had once pushed a cleaning cart unseen. Now her name was being whispered in classrooms, her program on the verge of national attention. He smiled to himself, thinking of something she had said years ago. Sometimes you've got to step back to see what's wrong. He finally understood. She hadn't just stepped back, she'd made the whole world take a step forward. 2 years later, the auditorium at Atlanta Technical College was full, not of investors or executives this time, but of teenagers in bright shirts, parents in folding chairs, and teachers holding phones high to capture every moment. On stage, a large banner read, "Code of Color, First Annual Graduation Ceremony." Amara stood behind the podium, her voice calm but full of fire. "When I first walked into a lab at Atlas Dynamics, I was invisible," she said. "No one saw me as a mathematician. I was just the woman with the mop. But the thing about being invisible is it teaches you to see everything." The room grew quiet. I saw systems pretending to be fair. I saw walls built out of silence, and I saw how power hides behind words like merit and objectivity. But I also saw something else potential, everywhere. In places no one bothered to look. Behind her, a slideshow projected images of the students she had taught, young faces of every color leaning over laptops coding with focus and joy. She gestured to them. These are the minds rewriting the story. The next generation of builders who understand that technology is not just data and algorithms, it's humanity translated into code. Applause filled the hall. In the front row sat her mother, Lydia, tears shining proudly, and her sister Renee, now wearing a medical student's badge clipped to her blazer. Next to them, Arthur Collins sat quietly dressed not in his usual suit, but in a simple gray shirt and rolled sleeves. His hair was a little grayer too, but his expression was softer than ever. When the ceremony ended, the crowd rose for a standing ovation. The students surrounded Amara, laughing and hugging her, their pride contagious. Arthur waited until the crowd thinned before walking to the stage. "You did it," he said. Amara smiled. "No, we did. You funded it, remember?" He shook his head. "Money didn't build this. You did. I just followed your lead." She tilted her head playfully. "Never thought I'd hear the CEO of Atlas say that." "Get used to it," he replied with a grin. "The Johnson Fellowship and Code of Color are merging next quarter. We're opening 10 new centers nationwide." Amara blinked. 10. "Starting with Chicago and Oakland," he said. "The board approved it unanimously. Turns out changing minds gets easier when the math is undeniable." She laughed softly. "That's a first math-fixing prejudice." Arthur's eyes warmed. "No, Amara, you fixed it." For a moment they stood in the soft hum of applause still echoing from the crowd. Then Amara looked out at the sea of students taking photos, their faces glowing with possibility. "You know what the real equation is," she said quietly. Arthur smiled. "Tell me." She turned toward the audience. "It's not IQ plus effort equals success. It's access plus belief equals equality." He nodded slowly, as if committing it to memory. After the ceremony, the evening turned golden. Parents lingered taking photos. Students lined up for certificates. Amara signed notebooks like an author, laughing each time someone said, "You changed my life." Later, when the hall finally emptied, she and Arthur stepped outside into the warm Atlanta twilight. The city buzzed softly in the distance, alive and imperfect, just like them. Arthur said, "You ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't walked into that conference room that night?" Amara smiled. Then 20 experts would still be arguing about an equation they couldn't solve. He chuckled. "You make it sound simple." "It was simple," she said. "They were looking for answers. I was just looking for the truth." They walked in silence for a moment, the cicadas singing somewhere beyond the parking lot. "You know," Arthur said finally, "when I first met you, I thought I was giving you a chance. Turns out you gave me one." She stopped looking at him. "To do what?" "To see the world as it really is and still believe it can change." Her expression softened. "That's the hardest part, but the only part worth doing," he said. Amara looked back at the auditorium doors, where the banner still hung under the soft lights, Code of Color building, the future one mind at a time. She whispered almost to herself, "When I corrected that equation, I didn't just change a formula, I rewrote the math of who gets to belong." Arthur nodded, and the world caught up. They stood there until the lights dimmed and the evening breeze picked up. The night smelled of new beginnings, of paper rain and courage. As they walked toward their cars, Arthur glanced at her and smiled. "You realize, Amara, you didn't just fix a system. You started a revolution." She laughed. "Then let's hope it never ends." And under the wide Atlanta sky, two figures once divided by class, race, and silence walked side by side. Not as CEO and employee, not as anomaly and savior, but as equals. The equation at last was balanced.